Hey guys, it's Dasha. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to today's video, which is going to be a review of the Poppy War trilogy by Kuang. This is an adult high fantasy series set in a world that is very reminiscent of our own. It's loosely based on the events of the Sino-Japanese War, the Opium Wars, as well as World War II, and it is very military heavy as well as religion / lore heavy. You are following Rin, who is an orphan girl from a very poor province. She decides that to escape her arranged marriage, she's going to study her ass off and get into Sinagard, which is the major military academy and the only one that offers free tuition because she is very poor. She aces her test, gets into the academy, and then starts to learn that the world is not how she thought it was. She is not as great as she thinks she is, and then before her education is actually even over, a war breaks out. We follow Rin and her friends through this series throughout these major military conflicts. There is a lot of things happening, including shamanism. That's the other main aspect of this story. Rin is able to commune with the gods. She is able to call down the gods and act as their vessel on the earth, and this gives her great power, but it comes with a lot of responsibility, so you see her grapple with that throughout the story. I've read the Poppy War before, but I decided to reread it in preparation to finish up the series. I bought all 3 books back around my birthday, and then I read all 3 of them in the month of January, one after the other, because I was just hooked. I'm going to structure this similarly to my Farseer trilogy review. If you haven't seen it and you're interested, you can go check it out right up here. I'm going to start by talking about each of the 3 books separately, and then I'll get into the whole series and talk about the sum of the parts. Things like characters and plot and intrigue and writing and all that stuff will be discussed in that section. It will be non-spoilery, however there will be a section at the end with some spoilers, so if you've read the series, feel free to watch until the end and come talk to me, you know, kind of trying to hide your spoilers, see if you agree with me or not on how I thought the series ended and how all the character arcs kind of finished up and all that kind of stuff. So starting with the Poppy War, I've read this twice. As I mentioned, I had to reread it to kind of refresh my memory before getting into the following 2 books, and this is the only one in the series I rated 5 stars. I absolutely love this book. I think there's so much good stuff in here. I think Kuang sets up everything so fantastically, and you're just getting to know Rin and everyone around her, and it's just so well done. The world building that you do get to see at the beginning of this is just so well crafted that you can kind of sense that there's something larger that's going to happen, and you know things that pop up in here will be important later. You just don't know how, you don't know when they're going to pop up, you don't know who's going to be affected, and it's just so well done. I found that the inclusion of history in here, especially because a lot of this was world building, was really crafted just excellently. I thought the world building that we got in here and the lore building too was just very excellent. It was very seamlessly done with the plot. Rin is learning all these things herself, and you're getting to learn through her eyes, but not in an overwhelming way for the reader. Everything just feels very well expositioned, and while Kuang's writing is not remotely flowery or purple prosy, it's still very impactful. The lines that she drops that just hit you in the gut are so fantastic, and this book just demonstrated that perfectly. You got to know some of the most major players across the entire series in this book, and you come to really respect Rin by the end of this one. You get to know her quite well, and overall, like I said, this is the one I rated the highest in the series. I don't know if I would say it's my favorite. It probably is. It's definitely the one that I think is overall the best. It's just engaging, gripping, fun, fascinating, brutal, everything you could ever want. The Dragon Republic, the second book, follows the events of the first, and it is definitely not a book that has second book syndrome or middle book syndrome. It's fantastic. It's got its own great plot. It picks up where you leave off in the first book while also introducing new plot elements that just keep you hooked. This is probably the one I read the quickest. I just could not put this down. There was one night where I sat down and I read over 450 pages of it because I could not put it down. There's so much happening. There's so much building off the first book, and while I liked it overall less than the first, it's not for a lot of reasons I could put my finger on. I think I was just less overall impressed because you're in the war throughout this one, whereas in the first book you also get the school setting. You kind of get a bit more of a different dynamic. It's not just constant conflict and suffering and brutality, whereas this one is definitely still taking place throughout the war. You're getting a lot of that kind of scenery imagery, and it just gets a little draining at times. It's definitely pretty harsh. It's definitely not as interesting in terms of like the settings and the type of atmosphere that you get, but the plot absolutely kept me hooked. I love the character dynamics in this one. There was definitely some really, really good moments in here, and I overall really enjoyed where the story went. For The Burning God, I definitely have mixed opinions. I'm one of those people that definitely liked the ending. I'm happy with how it turned out. However, this book had me really frustrated by the tunnel vision in the series. Because we are seeing things through Rin's perspective, it feels like there is a very solid focus on the now, the present, the physical, I guess, like the what is in front of Rin. But you as a reader, because you saw these other things happen in the previous books, you're wondering when they're going to reappear and what's going to happen with them. And it feels kind of frustrating because you would think that someone that's trained at the best military academy would remember a lot of these things. I also found this frustrating because I felt that Rin did not change that much. So reading in this book where she's making similar mistakes kind of bogged the book down itself. However, I found overall the plot pretty good. I like that R.F. Kuang kept up this momentum that she had built with the magnitude of the war and the brutality of it. It did get a little repetitive because, again, like the second book, this one takes place entirely during the war, so there's no respite from it. It's not like the first book where you have a large section of Rin training. It gets just very draining, being constantly in this military environment, constantly in this brutal atmosphere. So with the separate books out of the way, I want to delve really deep into the components of the whole series. We're going to start in my usual compile order with characters. And I have a lot to talk about. Rin. I was so disappointed by the end, I gotta say. I was really hoping, I don't think this is spoilery, so I'm gonna come out and say it. I was hoping after what we saw of Rin in the first part, in the first book, that yes, she's extremely stubborn. A lot of people dislike her strongly. She's not a likable character by any means, but I was really hoping we'd see some kind of arc with her because she sees so much brutality through the series. She lives through all these like backstabbing moments. She lives through so much heartbreak and loss, brutality and cruelty. And beyond that, she lives through major military political events that she is privy to, that she has a hand in. You would think that this girl would learn some fucking lessons, but she doesn't, and it drove me nuts because after all this time, there are still things that she just forces herself into, not even without thinking, but without considering other possibilities. And it's just kind of draining. This is not a spoiler because it does not talk about specific events, but Rin definitely gets betrayed a lot. Throughout the course of the war, there's obviously people that are switching sides. There's people that are doing these like backdoor dealings. There's people that are considering defecting. There's people that are doing all these things to serve themselves, right? As happens in real war. And Rin has to deal with that very, very closely and very often. So after that happens in both the first and second book, a lot less in here, I'd say she's still kind of green, so I guess she shouldn't expect these things to happen. But after so many revelations and things happening in the second book, you would think that by the third book, she would have learned some lessons. No, she still does a lot of things using not her head. I don't know what she's using. I don't know if she's just thinking through her god or if she's just still hell-bent on revenge, even though I thought that plot line kind of wrapped up. It's just kind of, it seems like you're just watching her hit her head against the wall when you know that she should have learned lessons along the way. And while that could be intentional because Rin's character is very headstrong, very stubborn and frustrating, I felt like it just came off as not lazy, but serving the plot rather than the character. Because we're following Rin so closely, I would have loved to see her grow a little bit. And while there was some things that changed, it didn't feel significant enough. And while I don't think she needs to have a character arc, I feel like it would have been much more rewarding at the end of the book. And while the ending did somewhat represent something different, in my opinion, which I'll get into in the spoilery section, I just didn't think it was different enough. So I found the payoff a little bit unsatisfying, truthfully, in terms of the character arc. In terms of like the plot and everything, I liked it a lot. But in terms of Rin's character herself, I was left hungry still. I guess. The other major characters that you follow a lot are Kite and Neja. I think it's pronounced Neja. I wish there was a pronunciation guide. Kite is her friend. He's very studious. He's very good at politics and maneuvering and strategy. And he becomes very much the yin to her yang. He's very much a counterbalance to a lot of the things that she is. And it's a beautiful dynamic. Honestly, the relationship dynamics in this are fantastic. There's so many things that I like so many tropes that I enjoy, and subversion of tropes too that I thought were great. In the first book, when you're introduced to Kate and Neja, who are her classmates at the academy, there's an instant dislike between her and Neja, and Kate and her get along quite well, and watching all of their relationships develop is fantastic. In this first book, you are also introduced to this little found family that Rin becomes a part of. It's a group of shamans who are also part of the military, and they're sent out on assassination missions during peacetime for the Empress. During wartime, they turn themselves into weapons. Since they're all able to call down gods in their own unique way, they're extremely valuable. And because they're all kind of freaks, they all love to get together and just be in their own little bubble and be their own friends, and I thought it was just the sweetest thing to watch them. And I thought that it provided a really good respite from all the brutality in this. There's just a really good balance having them as a group work together, and also the shit that they had to go through. It just provided a balance that the rest of the books didn't have, because that group is not as present. They face a lot of challenges throughout the second book, and they're just not as big of a part in the overall story, but it provided a really good balance in this one. And I think maybe that's part of the reason I like this better, is because there's that balance between the military and the academy, the friendships and the brutality. There's a lot more happening, I guess, rather than just constant war. But yeah, if you like that kind of found family trope of like misfits who don't fit in anywhere else finding each other, it's definitely in the Poppy War, and it's great. But then again, there's her other relationships with Neja and Kate that continue to develop throughout the series that are just absolutely phenomenal. I absolutely love the dynamics that everyone has. Neja and Kate as characters are really, really interesting. You get a lot more of Neja's backstory. I feel like Kate doesn't get a lot of space to develop as a character because he is so much the counterweight to Rin's excessive personality and her decision making, that Kite kind of takes a backseat to her large personality, but you still get to see him and really fall in love with him. And I absolutely loved his character when he was able to be on the page. I thought he was great. And like I said, Neja got a lot of space, and we got a lot of his backstory, and he had a really great arc throughout the whole series. I really, really enjoyed it. A lot of the side characters too are just so great. Master Jiang, who is one of the main teachers that Rin works with at the academy, absolute lunatic. He's batshit crazy. It's one of my favorite tropes personally, like the crazy instructor and the student dynamic. Holy shit, I will never get tired of it, and it's so great in here when they're still at the academy learning. He puts her through stuff just to like make her stronger and better, and she's like, you're absolutely insane, but I will listen to you and I will do it. And I love that personally. I think it's awesome. So there's a lot of really conflicting feelings that I have about the characters. Like Rin's was unsatisfying, but Neja's arc made up for it almost. So it's definitely not going to be for everyone from that perspective. If you're character driven, you might get frustrated. A lot about the series is frustrating though. I want to move on to the atmosphere. There's not a ton to say because, as I mentioned, 2 out of the 3 books take place mainly during wartime. And I mean, it's done pretty well. There's not much to say about it though. It's brutal, it's disgusting and gory. It is cruel. It doesn't get easier to read. It's definitely horrific and realistic if you know history. And it's done fantastically. I mean, R.F. Kuang does not shy away from giving you all the details of occupation, genocide, massacre, battlefield casualties, and injuries. Like, everything's laid out on the page for you. It's fantastic. I love it personally, but it's a lot for a lot of people. So I would definitely be very aware of that going into this. The writing is something that I want to just take a second to talk about, and I think I'll couple this with the intrigue because to me they kind of go hand in hand. I mean, the plot too, I guess, would. I don't know how to talk about one without talking about the other, so we'll kind of group them together. R.F. Kuang's writing is pretty simplistic. It's not purple prosy. It's not very intricate and delicate and beautiful. It's just as direct and brutal as the events of the books are, and I think it works perfectly for this. I think it makes for a very immersive reading experience, I guess, because in the down times when she's not talking about war, there are some moments that make you stop and go, oh my god, my heart. There's some moments that make you feel proud of Rin, and like you're enjoying watching her through her own eyes and how she feels. But the moments that talk about war, and which is, you know, a lot of the book, the writing definitely gets a bit more direct. It's very clipped, and I think it works really, just really, really well. Personally, I think the writing is extremely bingeable. Considering I read the whole trilogy in January, I just tore through it. I didn't want to stop. Yes, it was easier because I'd already read the first book, so I was looking forward to continuing, but like, holy shit, I could not put the series down. I just wanted to finish it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic in terms of like the intrigue. Like, I wanted to keep reading constantly, despite the fact that it was constantly about war, which got draining in just a kind of repetitive sense. It was still intriguing enough because of all of the maneuverings and the strategy that was going on, and I just wanted to know what happened. There was enough plot devices added that it didn't feel like the author was just trying to extend the series. It really felt like there was a lot happening because wars are complex situations. There are months where you're just marching and nothing happens, and that was depicted in the books. And there are constant losses and victories and battles that are just absolutely miserable and brutal, and you have to sit there and face them, and that's what is covered in the book. And it's just really, really interesting to watch, to be honest. The writing also lends itself to really exploring the history and the lore of this fictional China, because that's what it is loosely based on. Like I said, it was based on the Sino-Japanese Wars, World War II, and the Opium Wars, and all of these involve more than just China. They involved obviously Japan, but also Western players who stuck their nose in. If you do not know, Britain supplied China with opium in order to basically create mindless slaves for themselves to cultivate all the beautiful things China had to offer and bring it back to Britain. It was a horrific time. It was absolutely disgusting. And while this doesn't explicitly cover that period specifically, there are characters reminiscent of Westerners that do stick their nose in the politics of this country, which is called Nicara. They stick their nose in Nicaran politics. They have the technology to help them, but instead they want to come spread the word about their god, and they want to just kind of come in at the end, look like the saviors while everyone bleeds for months and months and months, and the Hesperians, this like Western force, just sit back and watch it happen. It's very frustrating. It's also very realistic, and I just absolutely loved how it was done. R.F. Kuang just weaves like history, lore, and these themes in so seamlessly. It's so spectacular to watch. The way she presents these ethical dilemmas in a way that doesn't feel like you are being lectured to. It doesn't feel like you're being asked a question in a Socratic method class where the prof's putting you on the spot. You're sitting there and you're absorbing it and you're trying to figure it out, because not only does it fit in with the plot in this story, it fits in with history and real events, and you're sitting there trying to deconstruct your own notions of warfare, of politics, of globalism. It's so fucking good. It's so good. That is one of my favorite things about this, is the way you're working with all of these ideas of ethics and morals during wartime, during politics, leadership, and just kind of chewing them over while going through the plot. Because if you wanted to just read this for plot, you absolutely could. It's exciting, it's fast-paced, it's brutal, but it's fun in a way that's like, at least you don't have to live this. It's fun to read from Rin's perspective. Like, it's enjoyable. That sounds so bad. It's enjoyable in a sense of, I like reading about these characters and what they do and how they react, right? I'm not saying it's enjoyable to read about genocides and rapes, but it's enjoyable in the sense that it's a well-crafted story. But if you wanted to delve deeper into this, if you wanted to talk about who the monsters are in war, who is right and who is wrong, who believes that they are right and whether they have a right to believe it, are the people who are complicit in crimes, even if they do it for their own survival, are they the bad guys? Do they deserve to burn? It's hard to think about these things, but the way that it's written into the story makes it so that it works with the story. It doesn't feel like it's just being dumped on you. It doesn't feel like it's being put there to make the author fluff herself up and make herself a better person or a more interesting author. She does it because that's what the book tackles with. You're dealing with Rin going from, you know, a student at a military academy to essentially a goddess herself, to a general leading tons of people to their slaughter. She's had to side with as many people as she could because she needs to stay alive and complete her tasks, which she feels is important. She's struggling with trying to figure out whether she's a monster, whether the people she's working with are monsters, whether the people she's working against are monsters. And it's not clear. And the series does such a good job of showing you that no conflict is ever one-sided. No conflict is ever black and white. These are the bad guys, these are the good guys. It just very clearly lays out how intricate human atrocities can be without shoving it down your throat, without like holding your hand and making you look at, okay, what these people did is bad and what these people did is good. Because it's never that clear. There's no line ever drawn in the sand like that. And it's really fun to read about it in this fictionalized context and then think about it and apply that to the real world and how these events actually happened. I've been rambling a lot. Like I said, I wanted to do a full review on this because there's a lot to unpack. There's so much happening in this series. To wrap up my non-spoilery thoughts, I just thought this series was so friggin' interesting. Not the best character arc for the main characters, but there's other really good arcs. I thought that the military parts were fantastic and the history and the lore, like the logic of the magic in this are so great. As I kind of rambled on about, if you are looking to read this and you want like the kind of tropes and themes are definitely militarism, ethics and morals, how to deal with leadership, how to deal with like PTSD from the war, how to deal with, there's a lot like to do with the war specifically, but beyond that, Rin is struggling with her belief system. She's struggling with trusting other people, so that's often talked about. Like I mentioned, the first book specifically has the trope of the crazy mentor that everyone thinks is absolutely insane, but he's kind of brilliant. There is a lot of religion and lore if you enjoy dissecting the lore and then finding out that things are real that people thought were legend. There's a lot of that in this series that's really, really well done. There's obviously the training montage, the military school or the school setting, that trope. There is some found friendships. There's some very close platonic friendships that are really, really well done in this. I personally think it's fantastic. There's obviously themes of mental health and, like I said, PTSD from not only warfare, but also from the friendships and dealing with your own personal relationships and issues. There's just a lot. There's a lot packed into this. The questions of ethics and morals are one of the strongest themes, I would say. It's something that recurs throughout the whole book, whereas like some of the tropes only appear in some of the books. But the themes are really the beautiful part of this, as well as the history and the military strategy. And that's what I like the most about it. If that's something you think you'd enjoy, I would absolutely recommend checking this out. And also don't forget that there's friggin' shamans and drugs and gods involved in this series, and why would you not want that? In my humble opinion. So it's more than just the military. There's so many other things happening. It's such a cool series, and I would absolutely recommend you check it out if you feel comfortable doing so, because they're very dark books, but they're worth your time. I wanted to quickly just kind of chit chat about my thoughts specifically. So this is going to be a spoiler section. If you do not want spoilers for the series, absolutely click off now. Thank you for watching, I appreciate it, but we're gonna get into spoilery thoughts here. You have been warned. That fucking ending. The way that Rin sacrifices herself makes sense because she never envisioned a life beyond the military. Even when she was forced into a role of governance, she was not equipped to handle it. She did not want to handle it. She's been on a warpath since she was born, essentially. She just wanted to survive, see her own form of justice, and then she didn't know what to do. That's why she was always looking for leadership in other people. So it made sense to me that she would sacrifice herself for peace for her country, because that was the only way forward, and she didn't really want to have to deal with the repercussions. She would either be executed anyways, or tortured by the Hesperians, or put through some kind of crazy experiments, which she wouldn't want to do anyways. She wants to be free, but she knows that that's not an option. So it ended the best way it could have. I'm so sad for Kate. He deserved so much better. He really was, like I said, the yin to her yang, and I feel like we should have gotten more of him. He has so much to offer. But like the way it ended kind of propped Neja up as the main character, which is really interesting because like I mentioned, he had the biggest arc. He was the one character I felt like had a very clear personality and that had some sort of an arc and that did different things. Like I felt like Rin was kind of one note in a lot of the things she did. She was always disruptive, she was always destructive, she was always impulsive and violent and never considered things, which is funny to me because she was so good at strategy in school. She almost went and apprenticed in it. So for her to throw out all of her strategy knowledge in real life, maybe that's a commentary on how, you know, what you learn in textbooks doesn't necessarily apply to real conflicts, but it felt a little bit reductive to her intelligence because she was supposed to be someone that was good at that kind of stuff. I thought that was kind of weird personally. Yeah, that was kind of weird, but like at the same time, I guess you could show that like some people don't change, some people are always aiming for power and revenge, and when they get what they want, they expire because they don't have anything else fueling their need to live. So maybe that's why Rin acted the way she did. Can I also just mention, this is so petty, but this drove me nuts. Why do all 3 books have the same map? Why do all 3 books? If you've read the books too, you know that the places that are central to the plots of each of the books are different. But all 3 books have the map from the first one, and they don't need to. They're not taking place in the same major cities. It drove me insane. Anyways, irrelevant but frustrating. I really liked how it also kind of came full circle with Rin leading a CK? I don't know how to pronounce that like group that they had of the other shamans, but yeah, Rin leading her own little group of shamans and training them and culling them when it's time. I felt that came very full circle. I also found that having Kate, Neja, and Rin at the end, like their own trifecta, felt also very full circle. I really enjoyed that. I think it made total sense because they all also had their own strengths and weaknesses. They all complemented each other well. All the scenes with Venka, Rin, Neja, and Kate together, like drinking, just always made my heart so happy, but I was so sad. Also Venka, oh my god, Venka deserved so much better. I kind of like the ambiguity that was left whether she was actually the mole, but I also don't, because I would have liked her to be cleared. I think that she wasn't, in my opinion. I don't think she was. I think it would have made sense, but at the same time, her character arc was so beautiful to watch, how strong she was, how she overcame everything, but she was still very fragile, but stubborn and headstrong and standing up for what she believed in. And I found that it was kind of disappointing to have her go out with that ambiguity. I also thought Rin should have been a little bit like nicer about it towards the end. She just like, it said that like they just didn't talk about it, and I was like, come on. She died protecting you. She deserves a little better. But anyways, I kind of like the ambiguity and I didn't. But like the scenes of all of them together, their own little found family, was really, really great in my opinion. I thought that they had a really good dynamic with all of them. I think the fact that they'd all seen absolutely horrific shit and were able to still come together and, you know, let go of their previous prejudices and all just act like kids from time to time, because that's what they are. They're fucking kids, the poor things. I think it's really, really great. But as I mentioned earlier, like Rin drove me nuts because she kept getting fucking backstabbed by everyone. She should have known to like not throw all her eggs in these very fragile baskets. Everyone let her down at some point. She was hell-bent on killing the Empress Daji, and then she collaborated with her, and then the Empress kind of was keeping her out of the loop, and I'm like, you should have known. And then Vestra, like, of course he's gonna fucking just use you. Of course he is. And you knew it too, and you just kept going. And then you acted all shocked when he was like planning other things the whole time. It's like, what did you expect? What did you expect? He sold you out to the Hesperians the second he could, and you still stuck around with him because you thought it was your only chance. It's just, I kind of got annoyed at like all these little things going back and forth. And when it comes to Neja, I can kind of understand her insistence to maybe not protect him, but maybe her defiance to like killing him, or her reluctance rather. I can kind of understand that. But everyone else, just the way she constantly switched sides and did not learn that you can't trust anyone, is kind of frustrating. I got really annoyed. I don't know if that's just me. Again, if you disagree with me on any of these, or if you have like maybe a different perspective, please do let me know, because I can't be the only one that feels this way. But if I am, I would love to know what you guys think about all of this, because it was a lot. I was kind of frustrated. But I think that is it for me. I think I've rambled on long enough. The sun's like literally setting and it's getting dark. So I'm gonna go. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of the series, since this is kind of the spoilery outro. Let me know if you, like I said, agree or disagree with any of my points, and if you have a different perspective, I would love to hear it. Please. My social media is linked down below. You guys can always come talk to me there. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.